Okay, so here's something to think about. Confidence isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to try, even when you know you'll make mistakes. And today, we're diving into how that idea applies to learning English, building habits, and making progress in a way that actually works.
That's such a great way to frame it because so many people think confidence comes after you've mastered something. But really, it's the other way around. Confidence grows through action, even messy, imperfect action.
Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of language learners get stuck. They're waiting for this magical moment when they'll feel ready, but readiness doesn't just appear. It's built through practice, through speaking, and through making mistakes. Let's start with this idea of confidence because it's such a foundational piece of the puzzle.
Right? So, what does confidence actually mean when it comes to speaking English? Because I think a lot of people confuse it with perfection.
Confidence in this context is about being okay with imperfection. It's about speaking without fear, even when you know your grammar might not be perfect or your vocabulary might be limited. And that's such an important distinction. Confidence isn't about never making mistakes, it's about not letting the fear of mistakes stop you.
That's such a powerful shift in perspective. But let's talk about where that fear comes from. What is it that makes so many people afraid to speak?
It's judgment, plain and simple. People are afraid of how others will perceive them. They worry they'll sound stupid, or that someone will criticize their mistakes. But here's the thing, most of that fear is in your head. When you hear someone speaking broken English, what do you actually think?
Honestly, I usually think, wow, they're brave. I respect the effort it takes to communicate in a second language. It's not easy, and it takes courage.
Exactly. Most people aren't sitting there critiquing your grammar or vocabulary, they're just impressed that you're trying. And I think recognizing that can be a game changer. Mistakes aren't proof of failure, they're proof that you're practicing, and practice is what leads to progress.
That's such a healthy way to look at it. But let's talk about another common challenge. Translating. So many learners get stuck translating word by word in their heads before they speak. Why is that such a problem?
Well, for one, it slows you down. But more importantly, it creates hesitation, and hesitation disrupts the flow of conversation. Instead of focusing on what you want to say, you're stuck trying to piece together a sentence in real time.
So what's the alternative? How do you move away from translating?
One of the best strategies is to learn phrases or chunks of language as single units. For example, instead of learning the word make and the word decision separately, learn the phrase make a decision as one complete unit.
That makes so much sense. When your brain stores phrases as single units, it's easier to recall them when you need them. And that naturally improves fluency.
Right? And I think it's important to clarify that fluency doesn't mean speaking quickly. It's about speaking smoothly, without unnatural pauses. You can speak slowly and still be fluent.
That's such a reassuring point. I think a lot of learners feel pressure to speak fast, but speed isn't the goal. Clarity and flow are.
Exactly. And speaking of flow, let's transition to daily habits. What small, consistent actions can learners take to improve their English every day?
Consistency really is key. Even something as simple as listening to English for 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference over time. It doesn't have to be hours of practice. It just has to be regular,
That's such a manageable approach. 10 minutes a day is better than 2 hours once a week because it builds momentum and it's sustainable.
right? Sustainable habits are the ones you can stick with long term. And the same goes for speaking practice. Even if you're just repeating phrases out loud to yourself, that's valuable practice.
Absolutely. I know some people feel embarrassed speaking out loud when they're alone, but it's such an effective way to build muscle memory. Repetition makes speaking feel more automatic over time.
Let's talk about comparison for a moment because I think that's another trap learners fall into. Comparing yourself to advanced speakers can be so discouraging.
It really can. But comparison doesn't have to be toxic. Instead of comparing yourself to others, compare yourself to your past self. Focus on your own progress. It's a much healthier mindset.
I love that. Language learning is a journey, and every journey has its ups and downs. There will be slow moments and even setbacks, but those don't define the overall trajectory.
Exactly. Setbacks are just pauses. They're not the end of the road. The key is to keep going, even when it feels hard. Missing one day of practice isn't failure, it's just a blip.
That's where discipline comes in. Discipline is what keeps you moving forward, even when motivation fades. It doesn't have to be harsh or rigid. It can be calm and steady.
And I think it's worth emphasizing that discipline isn't about doing everything perfectly. It's about doing something, even if it's small. Unrealistic goals, like studying for 3 hours every day, are what destroy discipline.
Exactly. Instead of setting yourself up for failure, aim for something manageable, like practicing for 15 minutes. Small, consistent actions lead to big results over time.
And your environment plays a huge role in supporting those habits. If your phone is always within reach, you'll be tempted to check it. But if your English materials are visible and accessible, you're more likely to use them.
That's such practical advice. Designing your environment intentionally can make a huge difference in your success.
So, here's a question for our listeners. What's one small habit you could start tomorrow to improve your English? Maybe it's listening to a podcast during your commute or repeating phrases while you're cooking.
Whatever it is, remember that small actions, done consistently, create big results over time. Progress doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be steady.
And on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Confidence, habits, mindset, it all ties together.
Absolutely. And if there's one takeaway, it's this. Language learning is a journey, not a race. Be kind to yourself, stay consistent, and celebrate every bit of progress you make.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time. Okay, so here's something interesting. Did you know that the fear of public speaking is often ranked higher than the fear of death? It's wild, but it really shows how deeply speaking anxiety affects people.
That's such a striking comparison. It's amazing how something as simple as speaking can feel so overwhelming for so many people.
Exactly. And when you add the challenge of speaking in a second language, it's like that anxiety gets amplified tenfold. It's not just about finding the right words, it's about battling your own body's stress response in real time.
Right? Like when your heart starts racing or your hands get clammy. It's a full body reaction, and it can feel almost impossible to control in the moment.
That's the thing. It's not just in your head, it's a physiological response. Your body is literally reacting as if you're in danger, even though you're just trying to have a conversation.
And when that happens, your brain shifts into survival mode, right? It's like all those grammar rules and vocabulary words you've studied just vanish because your brain is too busy trying to keep you safe.
Exactly. It's like your brain locks the door to the language center and throws away the key. But here's the good news. There are ways to calm that response and take back control.
So, what's the first step? How do you start to break that cycle of anxiety?
Well, one of the simplest and most effective tools is breathing. I know it sounds almost too easy, but slowing down your breathing can have a huge impact.
That makes sense. When you slow your breathing, you're basically telling your brain, hey, we're not in danger, everything's fine.
Exactly. And when your brain believes you're safe, it starts to function better. It's like the fog lifts, and suddenly you can think more clearly and access the words you need.
That's such a practical tip. But what about pauses? I feel like a lot of people panic if there's even a tiny pause in their speech.
Oh, absolutely. There's this misconception that pauses are bad, but the truth is, they're completely natural. Even native speakers pause all the time. It's just part of how we communicate.
And those pauses actually serve a purpose, don't they? They give your brain a moment to catch up and organize your thoughts.
Exactly. It's like giving yourself a little mental breather. And honestly, embracing those pauses can make you sound more confident, not less.
That's such a good point. Speaking of organizing thoughts, I think another skill that's really underrated is listening. Listening is such a huge part of building your speaking ability.
Absolutely. I think some learners get so caught up in grammar exercises or vocabulary lists that they forget about exposure. Just hearing real, natural language in context.
Right? Because the more you hear English in its natural form, the more familiar it becomes. And familiarity is such a big deal because when something feels familiar, it automatically feels less intimidating.
Exactly. Repetition plays a big role in that too. The more you hear something, the more it sticks, and the less scary it feels.
And when that fear starts to fade, that's when you really start to make progress. It's like a domino effect. Familiarity leads to confidence, and confidence leads to better speaking.
But, you know, if someone feels like they're stuck, like they're not making any progress, it might be time to change their strategy.
That's such a good point. Sometimes all it takes is a small shift in your approach to see big results. Like, if studying alone feels boring, maybe try speaking with a partner.
Or if speaking with strangers feels too intimidating, start by recording yourself. It's a great way to practice without the pressure of having someone else there.
Recording yourself can feel awkward at first, though. I think a lot of people avoid it because they don't like hearing their own voice.
Oh, definitely. It can be uncomfortable, but it's such a valuable tool. It helps you identify areas where you might need to improve, like pronunciation or intonation.
Speaking of pronunciation, I think there's this misconception that you need to have a perfect accent in order to be a good speaker.
Yeah, and that's just not true. Everyone has an accent, even native speakers. The goal isn't to sound perfect, it's to be clear and easy to understand.
Exactly. When you focus on clarity instead of perfection, it takes so much of the pressure off. And when you're not feeling that pressure, you can actually enjoy the process of learning.
So let's get practical for a second. What does a realistic weekly English practice plan look like?
Great question. I think it's all about balance. For example, on Monday, you could listen to 10 minutes of conversation just to get that exposure.
Then on Tuesday, you could repeat phrases out loud, focusing on pronunciation and rhythm.
On Wednesday, maybe write 5 sentences about your day. It's a great way to practice using new vocabulary in context.
Thursday could be about learning 5 new words, but in context, not just in isolation.
And on Friday, you could listen again to something you've already heard and try shadowing it, repeating immediately after the speaker.
Shadowing is such a powerful technique. It really helps with fluency and intonation.
And then on the weekend, you could review lightly, without putting too much pressure on yourself. It's important to have some downtime, too.
That sounds like such a balanced plan. It's consistent, but it's not overwhelming.
Exactly. Balance is key. It's about creating habits that are sustainable in the long term.
Speaking of sustainability, I think it's so important to connect discipline to your identity. Instead of saying, I'm trying to learn English, say, I am someone who practices English daily.
That's such a powerful mindset shift. When you see yourself as a learner, you start to act like one, and that builds consistency over time.
And consistency is what leads to those big breakthroughs, even if the progress feels invisible at first.
Absolutely. It's all about trusting the process and staying patient, even when it feels slow.
Because one day you'll look back and realize just how far you've come. And that's such a rewarding feeling.
It really is. Well, I think we've covered a lot today. Any final thoughts?
Just this. Small, consistent efforts add up to massive growth over time. So keep going, even when it feels hard.
Perfectly said. Let's leave it there.
Did you know that the average person spends nearly 20 hours a week consuming content online, but only a fraction of that time actually applying what they've learned? It's wild to think about how much knowledge just sits there, unused.
That's such a striking statistic. It really makes you wonder, what's the point of all that learning if it never translates into action?
Exactly. And that's what I want to dive into today. How to bridge the gap between learning and doing. Because let's face it, knowing something in theory is one thing, but putting it into practice is where the real growth happens.
Well, here's the thing. Most people don't even realize they're stuck in passive learning. They watch videos, read articles, listen to podcasts, and feel like they're making progress, but they're not actually engaging with the material.
Right? And passive learning can feel productive because you're absorbing information, but it's like reading about how to ride a bike without ever getting on one. You need that hands-on experience to really improve.
So, where do we start? What's the first step to moving from passive learning to active learning?
One of the simplest and most effective ways is to start asking yourself questions out loud. It might sound basic, but it's a game changer.
Questions like what?
Start with the basics. Ask yourself, how was my day? Or, what did I eat for breakfast? Or even, what are my plans for tomorrow? These are simple, everyday questions, but they force you to think and respond in real time.
That's such a practical tip. And I guess the power lies in creating original sentences instead of just repeating phrases you've memorized.
Exactly. When you create something original, you're building flexibility, the ability to adapt and think on your feet. And let's be honest, real life conversations are never scripted.
That's so true. People don't follow a script in real life, so if you're too rigid, you'll struggle. Flexibility is key.
Another great exercise is describing your environment. Wherever you are, just start talking about what you see, hear, or feel.
Like, I'm sitting in my kitchen. There's a cup of coffee on the table. I can hear the sound of cars outside.
Exactly. It's such a simple exercise, but it trains your observation skills, builds your vocabulary, and helps you practice spontaneous speech. And when we say spontaneous, we mean speech that isn't prepared in advance.
It's funny how something so small can make such a big difference. But what about mistakes? I know a lot of people get hung up on their mistakes and replay them in their minds over and over.
That's such a common trap. When you replay mistakes, you're just increasing your embarrassment. But here's the thing, embarrassment fades much faster than we think. The key is to notice the mistake, correct it, and move on.
That's such a freeing mindset. You're not stuck in the past, you're moving forward.
Exactly. And speaking of moving forward, let's talk about consistency. It's a word that keeps coming up because it's so fundamental.
Fundamental meaning essential and basic, right?
Yes, if someone studies intensely for a week and then stops for a month, they lose momentum. But if someone studies lightly but consistently, improvement compounds over time.
Compounds meaning it grows faster and builds on itself. It's like planting a tree. You can't just water it once and expect it to grow. You have to nurture it a little every day.
Exactly. And let's not forget about energy levels. Trying to study when you're exhausted is counterproductive. You're better off choosing a time when your brain is alert and focused.
That makes sense. When you're alert, you retain information better. Retention, of course, meaning your ability to remember what you've learned.
And that brings us to motivation. Motivation is great, but it's unreliable. You can't always count on feeling motivated, which is why routines are so important.
Routines meaning regular patterns of behavior. When something becomes a routine, you don't have to think about it or debate with yourself. You just do it.
Exactly. And that reduces decision fatigue, which is the mental exhaustion that comes from making too many choices. The fewer decisions you have to make, the more energy you have for what really matters.
Okay, let's imagine a listener named Alex. Alex wants to speak English fluently within 6 months. What advice would you give?
First, I'd say that goal might be a bit unrealistic. Instead, Alex could aim for daily practice and gradual improvement. After 6 months of consistent effort, Alex will see real progress.
Gradual meaning slow and steady. And that's a much healthier and more sustainable way to stay motivated because it's grounded in reality.
Exactly. And speaking of mindset, let's touch on that. Mindset is the way you think about something. A fixed mindset says, I'm bad at this, while a growth mindset says, I'm improving.
That shift is so powerful because your beliefs influence your actions. If you believe you can improve, you're more likely to persist, even when things get tough.
And persistence, continuing despite difficulty, is what leads to real progress.
Let's try a short practice dialogue to show how simple and natural conversations can be. I'll start. What did you do this weekend?
I went for a long walk and listened to a podcast.
Notice the sentence structure there. Past tense verbs like went and listened. Now your turn. What are you planning this week?
I'm planning to practice English every evening and organize my schedule.
Planning to plus a verb. See how these simple structures build real conversations?
Exactly. You don't need complicated grammar to communicate effectively.
One last thing I want to talk about is the plateau. That frustrating point where it feels like progress has stopped.
It's normal, though. During a plateau, You're consolidating what you've learned, which means strengthening your foundation.
That's so reassuring. Silence in progress doesn't mean failure. It means you're preparing for the next level.
Absolutely. So, to wrap up, we've talked about confidence, habits, consistency, fear, resilience, and the importance of real life practice. If there's one thing listeners take away from this conversation, it's this: progress is built daily, not dramatically, not perfectly, but consistently.
And before we go, let's give our listeners a small challenge. After this episode, spend 2 minutes speaking out loud in English. Describe your room, your day, or your plans.
Just 2 minutes. It's a small action, but it leads to real progress. And remember, mistakes are proof that you're trying.
And trying means moving forward. Thank you for spending this time with us. We truly appreciate your commitment to improving.
Keep practicing, keep improving, and most importantly, keep believing in your progress.
Take care and keep speaking.